What's up guys, welcome to my analysis of the new Destiny ViDoc Out Here in the wild. This will basically be in two sections. First I'm going to quickly break down the important things they themselves discussed in the ViDoc. Then I'm going to get into my actual analysis, all the things I've found. So make sure you stick around, there'll be a lot of info here. So it starts out with an emphasis on the world being a place you want to be in, a place you can keep coming back to without getting bored. Then they talk about exploration, saying you can go from Earth to Venus to Mars, to the Moon and to Saturn, although Mercury and Jupiter's moon Europa are also pretty much confirmed to be destinations in Destiny as well. Going on, Joseph Staten says how he believes the most exciting thing in Destiny is going to be the social experience of colliding with other players in the game. Talking again about how there is no matchmaking, friends and strangers just drop in. One thing I found interesting is when discussing public events, Urk said that you'll run into other players who might be on their way to a strike, or perhaps going through a story mission. If you didn't know, strikes appear to be some sort of firefight style or survival based activity. We know very little at the moment, but it does sound like there'll be something where you and some friends will fight off hordes or waves of enemies, probably with different objectives coming into play besides simply surviving. Now, I found this interesting as it means that strikes will be set out in the world along with story events, rather than in some separate part of the game. And I'm guessing that raids will be the same, they certainly should be. Also, while we're on the subject of co-op multiplayer, Urk did remind us that it's entirely your choice. If you don't want to play with other people, you can definitely just go off on your own adventure. Continuing on, Patrick, executive producer, says that your choice of race and class will condition how your character will evolve over time. I'm guessing that means that each race and class will have different upgrade paths or trees, and will also have access to certain types of gear and weapons specific to them, all of which will build your unique character over time. Then they remind us that the character you create and build is the character you will use everywhere, in all modes. Nothing changes if you switch from story to competitive or anything like that. And I think it's safe to say that the reason for that is everything is in the same universe. You don't switch from story gameplay to competitive multiplayer in a menu before you start the game. I'm sure it's something you will do or a place you'll go in the game itself. And besides, it's already been confirmed in the past that Destiny has no main menu. Next, they mention a couple of weapons. One we've already heard of, the Fate of All Fools, but the other, the Cudgel of Xanthor, is new. We don't know what it is, but I think it's safe to assume that they're both awesome exotic guns. After that, Josh Hamrick, senior gameplay designer, explains the 3-weapon system. First is the primary weapon slot, which is for your versatile assault rifle style weapon. I'm guessing all your normal mid-range assault rifles, carbines, etc. will go into this slot. Then there's the special slot, which he says is for your in-the-moment gun. So far we've seen a shotgun, a fusion rifle, which seems to be sort of an SMG style gun, and a hand cannon or revolver occupy this slot. So I'm guessing it's for closer range and more unique, or as the name implies, special, weapons. Finally, we have the heavy slot, pretty self-explanatory. So far we've seen heavy machine guns and a rocket launcher, which would fit into this one. There's also the various sniper rifles we've seen, which I'm guessing would go into the heavy slot. Skipping ahead, Sage talks about supers, short for super abilities I'm sure, which are the higher powered abilities the Guardians have, saying that some of them are really easy, like blowing stuff up or Hulk smashing a few guys, but that makes me think there's a bunch more that aren't as simple. I'm guessing the Golden Gun, the Hunter's Incendiary Gun ability, is an example of a slightly more complicated one, but I hope there's some that are even more interesting. Moving on, Natasha, a graphics engineering architect, talks about loot being a really exciting factor, but one thing in particular got my attention. She says, "What is this going to enable me to do? What did I win? What ability?" The ability part there got me curious. Will loot somehow have an influence on our special abilities? Will we earn them through loot, like weapons and other gear? Normally I'd think that abilities must be unlocked by leveling up, but perhaps certain abilities, like the grenade type, can be found? Or maybe some abilities require a piece of gear to sort of power them? I'm really not sure, and it's very possible she just meant that in a casual, non-literal way, but it still got me interested. To close it out, Sage says that if they can capture an amazing action game, but still give people the ability to customize it and pick the path they want to take, then they can bottle up that lightning a second time. I think basically meaning that if they can make an awesome action game, but pair it with the more MMO and RPG elements like playing with friends, building and customizing your character, exploring the world, earning loot, etc., and make it all work well, then Destiny will be successful. Now with that part out of the way, I can actually analyze all the new footage we're seeing. I'm going to jump between the bits of new footage, skipping through stuff we've already seen. First up, we've got this creature here. We've seen glimpses of it before, but very little. It's not known exactly what it is, but it's widely speculated to be a Hive Queen. Personally, I'd say that seems quite possible. It definitely seems like a hive, although perhaps not a queen, at least some special unit. Next, we get a badass in-game shot of the Black Garden. This is a location we've seen in concept art, speculated to be on either Venus or Earth, although I'd say Venus seems more likely, and is some sort of very special place, but we really know nothing about it. It definitely looks cool though. In this shot, we also get our first look at the new heads-up display. Starting with the motion tracker on the top left, you can see it's very simple and clean, which I think is great. It's clear and easy to see, but doesn't stick out or obscure your vision either. Then there's all the info about your weapons and abilities. We can see the 3 ability slots, the first being a grenade obviously, then the arrow probably means some kind of dash or thrust ability. Finally, the last one looks to me like the Fist of Havoc, the ground slam ability. Based on these abilities, I would guess that this character is a Titan, and the arrow is a new ability we haven't seen yet. Now, if we look at the weapons, something that caught my eye is that all 3 seem to be exactly the same, aside from the top one having less ammo. I'm guessing this is on the dev side, probably just for testing or something, but I wonder if this might mean we can put whatever weapon we want in each slot. Since the slots are called primary, special, and heavy, I wouldn't think that's possible. Again, this is probably just a developer thing, but you never know. The only other thing is, this heads-up display seems to be missing a shield or health indicator. I'm not sure if they're going for a different route in Destiny or if it's only for the purposes of this demo. Continuing on, this is a shot we've seen before, but it has something I never noticed. If we look at it frame by frame, when the Warlock uses his Solar Flare ability, we can see he actually throws a little grenade-like capsule, making me think this isn't a magical traveler ability, but rather a type of grenade. At the same time though, the Warlock's hand gets enveloped in flame after throwing it, so perhaps not. I'm thinking that maybe it's a mix, part magical and part technology. Next, we get a close-up of Joseph Staten's hands as he plays. The screen in the background is very heavily blurred, but it does get me curious. We can see what looks like the public event logo on top, and then below that, likely the current objective icon. He's shooting at some sort of shielded figure. It seems to be almost ghost-like, and it has a green glow. It's so blurred though, it could really be anything. Here's a cool view of the sparrows taking a jump, and then a bunch of stuff we've already seen before, but with some nice new angles. This first-person view of the hunter using the golden gun ability looks pretty awesome. Now here's a new clip. We've got a guardian with a beautiful sunset or sunrise behind him. I would guess this is on Mars, perhaps in the exclusion zone, although I don't know for sure. Whatever it is, it looks cool. After that, we see this location, which I first guessed was on the moon, and perhaps it is, but stick around until the end for another clip that makes me think it could be on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. I believe this is the same area that the unknown hive creature was in. We'll see this general area popping up a bunch more throughout the ViDoc. Moving on, here's something pretty cool. We've got a Warlock, Hunter, and Titan standing here, each switching to a different set of gear. It looks pretty sweet and gives us a little insight on some of the customization options. As we can see, they keep the same sort of style of each class, but they still look very unique as well. Here's a pretty cool shot of a Hunter carrying the exotic pulse rifle Red Death. Now this shot is pretty awesome. We see the same rifle going through a ton of modifications. I'll slow it down so you can get a good look. You can always recognize the base gun, but it does have some pretty extensive customization options. Different scopes, optics and sights, different displays or ammo counters, attachments to the side and top, silencers, customizations to the body of the gun, new stocks, and of course, camos and colors. I'm guessing we'll be able to do all of that to our own guns, and I'm sure that every gun we find will have customizations and things that make it unique. Overall, I think it looks great. Then we get a brief first-person view of the rifle scoped in. An interesting thing here is this placeholder test heads-up display. The part that caught my eye is the 4 special ability slots. We've seen characters with 2 abilities and characters with 3, so I'm guessing it's something you can level up to unlock more. But the fact that this screen shows 4 ability boxes does make me wonder if we'll have up to 4 abilities. This is obviously a rough, unfinished test build, so it may mean nothing, but still definitely worth pointing out. Moving along, we've got a bunch more stuff that we've already seen but from new angles. Then this concept art here of these guns, which we saw back at E3. One thing I didn't notice back at E3 though, is that this Duke Mark 44 hand cannon has the words City Sector 8 Armory stamped above the trigger. So it sounds like the city will be divided into different sectors, and seeing as the 8 is written as 08, that could potentially indicate that there are more than 10 sectors, since they needed to use double digits. I don't know if any of this will have any practical implication to the game, but I thought it was interesting. After that, some cool close-ups of guns in action, and then again, more of the same footage. Well, technically, I think it is new. If you look at the characters, some are decked out differently. This is more like the Gamescom playthrough, not the E3 one, but it's still the same public event. Skipping ahead, we've got more of the same, except here we get a new angle that looks pretty sweet. Now finally, back to the new footage. Here's a close-up of the Warlock from earlier with the Hunter behind. They're in the same location, which I think is either our moon or Europa. I have to say, I really like that Warlock with the blue accents. Looks awesome. On the right side, there's that weird black smoke stuff that we saw briefly many months ago. It's got this shining beam coming off of it. One thing I did find were these 3 areas in the background that are completely blacked out. I'm not sure if this is like a rendering glitch, I mean the game is still in pre-alpha, or if they're censoring something. If you look at this one on the right as it comes into focus, it does seem a little suspicious, making me think they blacked something out. It could very well be nothing, but it did catch my eye. This looks like the same spot, but from the other side. We've got a badass Titan shooting some Hive. The first thing I noticed about this Titan was how the weapons on his back stacked crossways. You can see the heavy machine gun and then the stock of another gun behind it. Not really significant, but I thought it looked cool. Then of course the next thing I noticed is these light or perhaps even sound rings on the left. I'm guessing it might be some sort of ability. Whether it was caused by the Guardians, the Hive, or just something on the map, I don't know, nor can I see it doing any damage. There is this big explosion shortly after, but I believe that's caused by the hunters shooting at something. The only other thing here are these webs. Likely it's a Hive thing you'll see wherever the Hive have set up shop. Then we get another shot of this same general area. Only things here are once again the webs, and there's this interesting symbol carved into the walls at the back. Not sure what it means, but it does look cool. I don't believe the Hive could have built this whole place themselves. I'm thinking they found it, but that definitely makes me wonder what race would have built it, as it's a very interesting design. If it was built by a different race, perhaps the symbol is connected to them. Moving past a bunch more old footage, we've got another blurry screen, likely the same one as before, once again, glowing shielded enemy that I can't make out. After that, we get another screen, this time it's clear. We can see it's a very early, unfinished test build. There's an objective icon saying Disrupt Wizard with a timer, and an interesting glowing cube thing over a circle, obviously the objective. Then there's a normal Hive charging the player, but right behind him there's a really odd creature, perhaps the wizard. It's hard to make out, but it looks like it has 4 tentacle arms and some weird eyes. Definitely looks quite creepy, and I think it has to be a Hive of some sort. The other interesting thing about this is that in the ViDoc, as Lars Bakken, the competitive multiplayer design lead, sorry if I butchered his name, is listing off the different game modes, this pops up right as he says strikes, which again sounds like it'll be reminiscent of Halo's Firefight. So I believe this is very early footage of Destiny's strikes. Continuing with that, this one comes up right as he says raids. We see the Hive creature using some widespread green ability. The Titan who is running forward seemed to back off once he hit the green area, so I imagine it causes a decent amount of damage. Then there's a muzzle flash, the hunter's golden gun I'm sure, and the Hive is just instantly burned up. That definitely seemed too simple for it to be a queen though. I imagine it's just a high-class Hive. Now after that, when Lars says public event, this pops up, meaning that the editing obviously does go along with what he's saying, indicating that those other clips we saw probably are strikes and raids. Then comes the really exciting one. He says competitive multiplayer, and this comes up. Now there's a bunch to look at here. Seeing as this is the very first time we're seeing competitive multiplayer, I'm going to be extra thorough. First, the enemy in front. He's obviously a player and we can see he's level 21. So your level definitely carries over into competitive just like the rest of your player. We also see his health bar, which I thought was very interesting. Seeing a health bar in a multiplayer game doesn't seem too common. Then he uses a new ability, some sort of protective shield, which reminds me of the bubble shield and drop shield in Halo. There's the motion tracker once again, this time showing a red dot for the enemy. Down to the weapons and abilities, this time there's only a grenade, probably something to do with restrictions in certain competitive modes. He's also carrying a shotgun and heavy machine gun, besides this assault rifle. Now on the left side there, we also see a waypoint for ammo, indicating ammo drops in at least some competitive modes. And then off to the right, we can see the game timer and scoreboard leaders, although for testing purposes, it may not have been tracking as it's all 0, or perhaps just no one got a kill yet. And then up above, we see the game type. This one is called Rumble. Anyone else thinking Rumble Pit from Halo? I am. This looks like a free-for-all game as well. The last thing here is that after the shield ability goes up, the player runs towards it, making me think that perhaps players can walk or run through these shields. Like in Halo, just bullets and such can't get through. Here's the other scene of competitive multiplayer, outside this time. It looks like two hunters are facing off. They both back away and lob grenades at each other. I noticed that the grenades do seem to have a very fast timer. Now, both of these competitive multiplayer scenes felt like a close quarters standard FPS multiplayer gaming experience, as in not out in the open world, especially since it had a countdown timer and game type. I'm really curious about how they will achieve this to make it work in the story. My idea has always been that they could have a sort of arena in the city where we could fight in this way. They could just say it's holographic and simulated or something like that, but whatever they do, I'm really curious to learn more. Continuing on, if you didn't catch it already, here's confirmation that the hunter's ability, which causes your gun to burst into flames, is called Golden Gun. And if we look on the bottom left, we can see the symbol for Golden Gun on the right, and then another ability on the left. Since the only other ability we've seen that hunter use in this section of the gameplay is that little homing missile thing, I think it's safe to say that left symbol probably indicates that ability. Then we see this new super ability, Radiance, which seems to have a large and explosive area of effect. Also, if we look at the bottom left, we can see the solar flare symbol on the far left, then this flame icon, which I'm really unsure of. It must be a new unseen ability. And finally, that interesting yellow one is Radiance. Also on the weapons, we can see in the middle one, or the special slot, is a fusion rifle, which you can also see on his back. Another thing is that the Hive he's attacking is a Hive Knight and is a level 7. I hadn't noticed on the other enemies before, but I think it's very interesting that the enemies actually have a visible level. Other than that, there's a waypoint on the right, and there's also a very interesting purple ball of energy or light up in the top middle area. Here's the Radiance ability being used again. There's a few more interesting things in this shot. First, if you look at the abilities, you'll see little lines under each. Once he completes the Radiance move, one of those lines disappears, so I imagine that there's times where you'll have a limited number of uses on your abilities, likely in certain modes. There's also a number of assists popping up, meaning you do get awards for that sort of thing. Then there's a current objective, Decode 3 Runes, which is a new type of objective we haven't seen before. Up on the motion sensor, you can see the blue dot for an ally. And then on the far right, there's a little bar that says XP, filling up for the next level, I'm sure. The last thing I saw is that this hive running towards the other Guardian has a greenish shimmer around him, and when it gets close to the Guardian, it sort of explodes out. I'm not sure what that might be, but probably an ability of some sort. Moving on, the current objective is now to kill Fogoth, this giant hive beast. He looks pretty dangerous and reminds me a little of the Rancor in Star Wars. He's surrounded by a bunch of regular hive, including this level 9 hive thrall that is marked. If I freeze as his Radiance attack is hitting the enemies, you can see that the red dots on the motion tracker get overlaid by arrows. It's interesting to note that a blue arrow also came over the ally, which leads me to think that perhaps it indicates every unit you are currently inflicting damage on, teammate or enemy, but I could be completely wrong, that's just a thought. Then there's a little medal on the left that says resist, so kind of like when the assists were popping up, I guess. The last thing is this big purple beam that looks like it's coming from the monster's head. Pretty nuts. Continuing on, we get a look at Sage and his awesome beard. I've missed him since the Halo Reach vidocs. On the screen behind him, there's what seems like a test level playing. It looks like a sparrow cruising along on Mars or something along those lines. Then we see confirmation of Fist of Havoc being the Titan's Hulk Smash ability. Of course, we also see the Nova Bomb again. These both appear to be supers. After that, we see a bunch of Hive attacking the blue Warlock, also giving us a good view of the Hive's slashing attack, as you can see. And then we get to see the Nova Bomb vaporize all of them. Skipping ahead past some old footage again, we've got this scene here showing them picking up Glimmer from an engagement. Also, for the abilities down on the bottom, we've got a new one. The one on the right that's recharging is the Nova Bomb, and then the one on the left is the same one we saw the Hunter using. Again, I think it's those little red homing missiles, although I could be wrong. And then in the middle, we've got the new one. I have no idea what it might be, but I'm eager to find out. The only other abilities that we've seen used but don't know the symbol for is Glide and that Bubble Shield-like ability from the competitive multiplayer clip. I definitely don't think that would be the symbol for Glide, it wouldn't make any sense. So I would say it's either that protective shield or something completely new. Now there is another interesting thing about this. We don't know what class this character is. I'm gonna guess Warlock, but I could be totally wrong. The thing is though, he has the Nova Bomb super, definitely a Warlock ability, and then he has that other ability we've seen the Hunter using. So that means we can mix and match abilities between different classes, at least some of them. I'm guessing that specials might be class specific, and then some of the lower level abilities can be used anywhere. Then we see this scene that reminds me of Borderlands, opening up this interesting chest to just have loot pour out. It looks like when you get loot in Destiny, you don't see the actual item fall out on the floor. Instead, you get these big orbs, and you see the item once you pick up the orb. Which I don't think makes any practical difference, but all those jewel-like orbs do look pretty awesome in my opinion. Here's a shot on Mars, very similar to the shots we've already seen, as well as this one on Mercury. After that, we see the Guardians running up this path. It is new footage, but there's not much to gather from it. Here's something pretty interesting though. It's a good clear front view of that Hive creature casting some ability, sending little bursts of spark-like energy at the Guardians. There's also another blacked out spot in the background, like the one we saw earlier. In fact, it might even be the same spot. Next, there's a good view of the blue Warlock, and behind him there's a really interesting area. Perhaps a large door. Whatever it has a cool design, and it looks like it may have some really rustic control terminal on it. Behind him, we can also see a Hive leaping from one area to another, up on the sort of second level of this area. So it seems that the Hive can jump quite far. Also, that one and the one coming out in front of the Warlock both have that bluish-green effect on them. It must be a common thing. This Hive in front charges the Warlock, and he seems to just put his hand out. Once they make contact, the Hive is vaporized. This must be yet another ability we don't know anything about. Unless he Nova Bombed him at very close range, but I don't think that was it. Continuing on, there's a couple of sparrows traveling along a road of sorts. This definitely looks like it might be Mars, and that's my first guess, but it could always be on Earth as well. For some reason, this scene gave me a feeling of having to travel across the map to get to where you need to go, which I think is just awesome. Getting towards the end here, we've got a Hive screeching at the camera, and in the distance we can see what potentially looks like ice, in which case I would say this scene, along with all of the rest of the Hive stuff we've seen in this vidoc, might be on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, and not Earth's moon like I previously guessed, which I think might actually make more sense. Such odd structures filled with space zombies seems a bit better suited to a faraway moon. Although at the same time, we do know that Earth's moon does have some pretty eerie stuff, so we'll just have to see. Moving on, we've got a gloomy scene of a hunter shooting at something. There's an interesting glow in the background. It looks like it's reflecting from something lower down. Since we know Destiny will have lava, that did pop into my head, that there's lava underneath, but honestly it could just as easily be lanterns. Then there's a couple more shots we've already seen, but after that we see the underside of the Devil Walker with these glowing leg parts. It looks pretty cool. Next, I think this shot might be in competitive multiplayer, as it seems like the same environment we saw just a bit ago. Then there's this shot showing the hunter powering up his golden gun while collecting some glimmer, looking pretty damn awesome. And then finally this last shot here, although not exactly a new area, it does clearly show the Warlock using his glide ability, which basically allows you to briefly hover or levitate. Definitely looks quite useful. And with that, we've come to the end of my analysis. That was absolutely everything I could find in this vidoc. I hope you enjoyed the video and I pointed out some things you missed. I really did put a lot of work into this one. It's the most complicated and longest video I've made yet. So if you did enjoy, leaving a like would be greatly appreciated. It really helps get my videos out there more, and also shows that you guys care when I put a lot of extra effort into a video like this one. Also, if you see something I missed or have any questions or input on anything, be sure to let me know in the comments. But anyways, thank you very, very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more in-depth videos like this, as well as the latest Destiny news, and I'll see you in the next update.